Welcome to the newest episode of Beatin' and Bangin'. I'm your host, Kyle Dalton. In today's video, we've got a wide variety of topics to cover, including an incredibly heartbreaking story from Joey Logano and what he saw last week in the mountains of western North Carolina, NASCAR's response on what happened in the controversial ending of Saturday's Xfinity Series race, plus another response from NASCAR in the legal system and its lawsuit with 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports, which includes an interesting claim of extortion. And finally, our By the Numbers segment, where I take a closer look at Hailie Deegan and the number 15 AM racing car in 2024 to see if she was in fact the main problem with the car's lackluster performance. Interestingly, I crunched the numbers last weekend before she announced on Monday that she is moving on from NASCAR to IndyCar and the Indy NXT Series. However, before we get to that, I want to go back to earlier in the week and Joey Logano's appearance on SiriusXM NASCAR radio. I listened to his entire interview on the morning drive, and I'm sure you've read stories from that conversation on how he learned about the news that he was back in the playoffs following the disqualification of Alex Bowman. But there was one thing in his hour-long discussion that I couldn't stop thinking about after he said it. He was talking about the trip he and his wife Brittany made up into the western North Carolina mountains last Friday to see what his foundation is doing to help and what more they might be able to do. He shared one family's haunting experience. Take a listen.
It's like out of the movies. We met one family, and they lived up in the mountains, and they had like a little compound where they had like 3 or 4 homes where like the grandparents, the parents, grandkids all lived with like next door neighbors to each other. And there's a fire department right across the street, and one of the family members, a volunteer firefighter, went across the street with his 2 boys, and within 3 minutes watched a landslide come through and wipe out his whole family. And like hearing that story firsthand is like, I don't know what to say. And you ask them what they need, and it's like what they need is gone. Like they need their family, and they found them 3 miles down the mountain 9 days later. Like you can't even put it into perspective. It was a 6-foot creek that looked like a ski slope now. Like it's like 200 feet wide. And there's cars that we drove down to see some of the area. There's cars that you can't figure out what they were before.
Absolutely heartbreaking. Logano said the people in the area need all kinds of supplies for a recovery that's going to take years to happen. But he said one of the most important things they need now is people thinking and, more importantly, talking about them so they can stay in the spotlight and continue to receive help. That's what I'm doing here. We need to keep talking about it so these people aren't forgotten. Moving on to our next story, and it happened on Tuesday when NASCAR Senior Vice President of Competition Elton Sawyer made his weekly appearance on SiriusXM NASCAR radio to discuss the races at the Charlotte Roval. He was asked about the Xfinity Series race and the ending when it took officials more than 15 seconds to put out a yellow after Leland Honeyman had buried his car in the tires.
Yeah, I would agree. It did take too long. I met with our team in the tower after the race Saturday night. We went through what happened there. We made some adjustments overnight as far as camera angles so that our replay operator could get to that, to be able to see that quicker, to be able to get that information to the race director. So we made an adjustment over Saturday night, felt like we were in a much better place on Sunday. Again, it's a call that we wanted to get to quicker, but you got to have the information, you got to have the view to be able to do that, and felt like we made that correction overnight on Saturday.
While Sawyer indicated adjustments were made to prevent a similar situation from happening again, he never addressed why it happened in the first place. He suggested that his team didn't have all the information. What? How is that even possible? The viewing audience at home had that information through the television broadcast. But somehow, based on Sawyer's remarks, we're supposed to believe that the race director didn't have access to that same information in a timely manner. Absolutely mind-blowing. The week before, it was the Talladega towing damaged vehicle policy debacle. This past weekend was the Xfinity Series ending and the no call on Bubba Wallace and William Byron on shortcutting the chicane. Fans are understandably frustrated with the sanctioning body being consistently inconsistent. So yesterday on a call with the NBC broadcast crew, I asked the guys what they would tell fans who are fed up with NASCAR's poor officiating as of late. Here's what Jeff Burton had to say.
What I'd add to it is that the playoff and every point matters puts more emphasis on the officiating, right? Because if this were 15, 20, if this were 20 years ago, a lot of these things that we're talking about would be with drivers that aren't competing for a championship. And it kind of gets swept under the rug a little bit. So the emphasis is that much higher because of how much it matters. And one position makes a major difference. And I agree with Steve 100%. I think our fan base, NASCAR, teams, drivers, everybody wants the officiating to be right. And when you don't feel like it is, then it's okay to say it. And, they do have a little bit of a thankless job, because when they get it right, no one congratulates you, right? But that's what you signed up for. And but I think the key is there's just so much on the line today. In every lap, every stage, there's just more on the line today than it's ever been for more people.
But that's not all Burton had to say. Later in the call, he was talking about Denny Hamlin and his lack of a championship. I found what Burton had to say really interesting. Take a listen to this.
I went into Martinsville with a pretty decent lead. We broke an engine, and coming home, I don't know why, but I kind of knew that was it. I was saying all the right things, and I was believing all the right things, but deep inside of me, I had a moment where I went, it's not going to happen. My age and everything, it just doesn't feel good. It feels like this is it. And unfortunately, that thinking feeling was correct. But you do start wondering, am I going to get it done? And especially with as many races as he has won, right, is only natural. As good as he is, as many good things as he's done, that's the thing that's left. And, he says the right things. He says that's not going to define his career. But I can tell you from a guy that didn't win a championship, it's damn hard to get over it. Even at my age now, it bothers me that I never won a championship.
You have to love Burton's candor because you can totally hear the pain in his voice from not winning a title. Also making headlines yesterday was NASCAR's response to the motion for expedited discovery filed by the plaintiffs, or 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports. What I found really interesting is right out of the gate, NASCAR's lawyers didn't sugarcoat the governing body's position. In the first section of the document titled Bottom Line Up Front, it read, plaintiffs have filed a meritless suit against NASCAR alleging baseless antitrust claims in order to obtain commercial agreements they previously rejected and to attempt to extort more favorable contract terms. Okay, so claiming extortion right out of the gate. Nice first shot, I guess. But things got even juicier later in the document when it was revealed how NASCAR is moving forward with the 2025 season and how that pertains to the two teams involved in the lawsuit. Plaintiffs did not timely sign, and under basic contract law, the offer was thus rejected, leaving no offer existing to be accepted. When the extended deadlines to sign expired, NASCAR took down the Adobe sign and moved on to planning a 2025 season with 32 instead of 36 charters. NASCAR carries contractual obligations to the 13 teams that accepted its offer of 2025 charters, and consistent with the terms of the 2025 charters, NASCAR is working on reallocating funds that plaintiffs would have received to increase prize money and other special awards for the 2025 season for the benefit of teams that timely executed 2025 charters, as well as open teams who can compete to win the increased prize money and other special awards. So I'm not a lawyer and I don't pretend to be one, but as best as I can tell, the translation is 2311 and Front Row will compete as open teams in 2025, and the other teams who signed the charter agreement can expect to receive larger payouts due to their portion of the pie being increased. Man, this thing is just getting rolling, and you have to think if it makes its way through the legal process, there's going to be a lot more interesting details revealed. Stay tuned. And finally, it's time for our By the Numbers segment. Today, before we do our last 5 races analysis, I want to talk about Hailie Deegan. As I mentioned in the beginning, last weekend while watching the Xfinity Series race, I started thinking about Deegan and how long she'd been out of the car, and how the number 15 had performed since her departure. The numbers look like this. In 2024, she scored just 4 top 20 results in 17 races, her best finish that 12th at Talladega. However, when taking a broader look at the totality of the 2024 season for that number 15 car, the numbers indicate it wasn't all a driver issue. In her 17 races with the team, Deegan registered an average finishing position of 26.82. Since her departure, the AM racing car has run a dozen races and been piloted by 6 drivers, including 2-time Cup Series champion Joey Logano and Cup rookie Josh Berry. The average finishing position over that span is 26.25, or just slightly better than Deegan. Taking Logano and his 3 races out of the mix, including his 8th at Chicago and 9th at Watkins Glen, and the AFP of the 4 car bumps up to 28.88, or notably worse than Deegan's average. Now, I know there was a debate around the time Deegan left AM Racing on whether the lackluster performance was due to her driving or the number 15 car and its setup. In hindsight, it was likely a combination of both, with the rookie's inexperience surely playing a factor. But based on the season's numbers with the other drivers, the car itself was also a big reason for her struggles. And our last item for the day is our last 5 races analysis. And like last week, my buddy Joel Steuben has put together a last 5 breakdown that focuses on the playoff drivers. And as you can see, Christopher Bell is at the top at 6.8, with Kyle Larson a few spots behind at 8.8. They are followed by Denny Hamlin, William Byron, and Chase Elliott, rounding out the top 5. Interestingly, the next playoff drivers still in the hunt are the Team Penske boys, who come in with average finishing positions of 19.4 and 19.6. But undoubtedly the biggest surprise is the number 45 of Tyler Reddick. The regular season champ has struggled in his last 5 and has an AFP of 20.6. Now that we're moving into a new round, does Reddick hit the reset button and return to his regular season form? Does Logano take advantage of his second chance? All questions that we'll have answers to over the next 3 weeks. All right, guys, that's a wrap on this episode. I want to hear what you thought about it. First, what did you think of Elton Sawyer's explanation for what happened at the end of the Xfinity Series race at Charlotte? Sticking with NASCAR's responses, what did you think of NASCAR's court filing yesterday and what they had to say about 2311 racing and Front Row in 2025? Also, curious to hear what you thought about Jeff Burton's comments on not winning a title and how he thinks Denny Hamlin is experiencing something similar. And finally, from our By the Numbers segment, I'm curious to hear from you Deegan fans if you feel like these numbers of the other drivers in the number 15 car this year make you feel better. And what do you think about her moving to the Indy NXT Series next year? Thank you guys for checking out the latest video and for supporting the channel. I really do appreciate it, and hope you have a great rest of your day.